What was once a punchline in college football is now quietly a strength for the Nittany Lions.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. I'm also a credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Also, thank you to the everydayers for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Friendly reminder to be active in the comments section. As we are talking wide receivers today, how Penn State wide receivers have gone quietly from a weakness to now a strength for this team. We're also going to talk about the long-term outlook here, why the future is brighter than the present. Talk about some breakout potential players going into this season who could push the starters for reps, why it could be a true freshman, but wide receiver right now is a strength. So overall, let's address this here. And it starts with the three key transfer portal additions. In most recently, Trebor Peña, but also remember the winter portal cycle brought in two starters as well. Kyron Hudson and Devonte Ross. All of those guys have played a ton of college football. They have the experience. They are veterans. They're going into their final year of eligibility, each of them. So this is the year for them to make their final impact. And they're all going to be at Penn State. These are all instant starters. There's no debating that. Kyron Hudson's going to be the starting X. Trebor Peña is going to be the starting slot. And then Devonte Ross is going to be the starting Z. And all three of those players are upgrades in comparison to what they had in 2024 and in 2023. I think Kyron Hudson's a better option for what they need at the X compared to what Trey Wallace gave them. And Trebor Peña, an upgrade at the slot over a Liam Clifford or a Caden Saunders. And then at the Z, Devonte Ross, I think is going to be a step forward for Penn State in comparison to Marques Hagans. And when I look back on it, the wide receiver being a joke for college football, these guys, Trey Wallace, Marques Hagans, Keandre Lambert-Smith, they weren't bad. They were capable. They all landed at Power 4 spots. And Wallace and Lambert-Smith were both in the SEC. Lambert-Smith just got drafted. But they disappeared in the biggest moments of the season. Against Michigan 2023, Ohio State 23-24, Notre Dame this past season in the semifinal. So when the spotlight was the brightest, the wide receivers could not get it done and didn't help the team and were a liability. Because it's great that they can do it against Purdue or West Virginia. We saw it happen against West Virginia a couple of times, but it wasn't enough. Penn State was still able to succeed and get as far as it did, despite having wide receiver as such a liability against competition that was above average or elite. Those Ohio State secondaries were elite. That Michigan championship team, despite a lot of the allegations, had a top 5 defense, I'm pretty sure the best defense in that cycle. So why Penn State's wide receiver room goes from, well, okay, there's nowhere else to go for up. There's nowhere else to go but up for this wide receiver group because, yeah, they've been abysmal at times. But the difference here now is that, okay, in 2023, it was just Keandre Lambert-Smith where defenses had to zero in on. And then in 2024, okay, it extended a little bit. Trey Wallace and somewhat of Marques Hagans, right? You had to respect the speed and everything else. But still in one-on-one coverages, those guys had difficulty. And if you took away Trey Wallace, well, in comparison to last season. But now you have to deal with Trebor Peña, Kyron Hudson, and Devonte Ross all at the same time. I know Tyler Warren's not, but we're talking about wide receivers specifically. So Ross's speed being a deep threat, Trebor Peña underneath as a slot, Kyron Hudson as a guy that will make just about any catch. Separation might be a little bit of a question mark for Kyron Hudson, but he'll make any catch that with the football that you throw his way. He makes just about every single grab. So you got a red zone threat that Penn State didn't have a season ago outside of Tyler Warren. Trebor Peña reminds me a lot of Parker Washington. I don't think he's a player that necessarily is going to take over a lot of games. I do want to see him against Big Ten competition as well. I want to see all of these guys. Well, Kyron Hudson's done it at USC. That was a crowded USC room. I see the people that talk about how, well, Hudson was a backup. USC had 4 or 5 reliable wide receiver options last year, and he was a part of the mix. So Hudson is another red zone threat. So is Trebor Peña. He had 9 touchdowns last season for Syracuse. So when I look at this group, you have to account for all 3 instead of just 1. So Devonte Ross is going to be that deep threat for Penn State this season. And he's actually going to be a little bit of a gadget player as well. I have good expectations for Peña, for Hudson, but Devonte Ross, I think, is going to be the wide receiver of the trio that ends up having the most yards. Who knows about touchdowns? We'll see where the touchdowns go there. Because Singleton and Allen are going to be used in the passing game. Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, eventually Andrew Rapley is going to come back from injury too. So Penn State has 3 reliable tight ends that are going to mix into a rotation as well, that are going to see reps, that are going to see targets and stuff. So it is this balance where you have multiple targets that Drew Aller can rely on, that can win in one-on-one coverage. Trebor Peña coming over from the ACC, sure, but he was one of the leading receivers in the ACC. These guys they're not going to light up the box score routinely because it's going to be so spread out. You're going to have Peña with receptions and receiving yards. You're going to have Kyron Hudson, right? The ball, Drew Aller has the leverage, has the luxury of being able to distribute the football. So it's not just being about, oh, well, he needs a star wide receiver. You need 3 capable, competent wide receivers that can all do their responsibilities accordingly. So why wide receiver has been such a problem is because Penn State didn't have this kind of depth, didn't have this kind of trio and veteran experience. The room, when it was inherited by Marques Hagans, did not have a long-term outlook, which is what we're going to talk about. This is what he's building towards. We're going to get to that in the final segment. But Hagans inherited a rough situation as a relatively new coach in terms, well, he was at Virginia for a long time, but somebody with this kind of responsibility, the magnitude of his decision-making and his development, this was really getting into territory that he had not been in. So you are a new wide receivers coach in terms of the Power 2 with the Big Ten and the SEC, inheriting an awful situation, and now you're beginning to turn it around. Mike Yurcich's play calling didn't really help that much either in that 2023 season. So Andy Kotelnicki, combined with veteran wide receiver playmakers across the board at all 3 positions. So it's not just one wide receiver where it's all on Keandre Lambert-Smith. It's all on Trey Wallace and maybe a little bit of Amari Evans. No, you have 3 starters that you got to account for. Trebor Peña can be a blocking wide receiver as well. Devonte Ross can be that deep threat that is going to keep a safety back, which opens up the run game. Kyron Hudson is an effective blocking receiver as well. He's got a bigger build to him. That's important in a Kotelnicki offense, and especially a Penn State team that's going to be a run-first team because of Singleton and Allen. So these guys can block or do their job in the run game. Then they don't have to cycle in and out based on situations, and you have that element of surprise that, okay, well, when Devonte Ross is on the football field, Penn State could still run the football effectively. So these guys are all going to start. There's no doubt about it. But what about some of the breakout potential? Everybody talks about Tyseer Denmark. I want to talk about this true freshman that could make a name for himself and be in the rotation sooner rather than later. We'll talk about what the depth chart's going to look like behind these 3 coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Now, that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending in one place. So you stop just managing money and you start building wealth. You'll get surprising insights. When I started using Monarch for myself, I realized just how much money I was spending on different things like groceries or package deliveries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. And the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. And you'll get easy collaboration moving forward. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Everybody's going to talk about Tyseer Denmark, and I get it. I am still a huge Tyseer Denmark fan. I've been impressed with him in spring football practices. Denmark, somebody that can play both boundaries, can be in the slot. They've been trying to work him into the slot to get him into that rotation. So now that helps out. So you have three capable starters that you get from the transfer portal, and it doesn't put the pressure on, well, Denmark going into year 2 needs to be a starter. He has to be a starter. But Denmark, you can work him into the rotation, get him some reps. And as the season goes on, Tyseer Denmark's days of football his better days of football are ahead of him towards the end of the season as opposed to the beginning, which is going to be huge going into the playoffs and everything else. But you need to get him those reps. Repetition, repetition, repetition. It's how you get better. That's not rocket science here. He's not the only young up-and-coming wide receiver that I am eager to see for Penn State. You've heard me mention his name a few times. You've seen other people report about him, and how could you not? Koby Howard. Koby Howard, true freshman wide receiver. His recruiting process was intriguing, to say the least. Had dealt with an injury in high school, and for a while, I had heard that, hey, Koby Howard is all set on Penn State. It's a matter of when Penn State wants to take his commitment. That's what I had been hearing for the longest time from my recruiting sources. And then Howard comes in, he enrolls early, and he becomes one of the players that is, like Denmark in training camp last year, heading into the season, is generating buzz. Both Koby Howard and Tyseer Denmark share similar traits in the fact they're really talented route runners. They are great off the line of scrimmage. They're really good, at least where they are in for a second and a first-year wide receiver, at creating separation. For where they are in their development, they are good. They are ahead of the curve at doing those kinds of things. They can block. They are not afraid to be physical. And that's what you like to see, because Tyseer Denmark is a smaller build, and Koby Howard, for what it's worth, are smaller build wide receivers. I wouldn't compare them to KJ Hamler, but they're certainly not Juwan Johnson either, where they're 6'3", 6'4", right? They're in the middle, but they can be effective in run blocking too. They are really good, or they at least surprised me with the way that they push defensive backs back off the line of scrimmage at practice. So Howard and Denmark, I could see them being involved in the rotation as the season progresses, because learning the playbook or getting situated, and I know Denmark's in year 2, but you still have to be comfortable with it. Just because you know it better doesn't mean that you're going to, right? It just takes time. So as the season goes along, the second half of the season, I have extremely high hopes for both Denmark and Koby Howard. Matthew Outen, Lyric Samuel, Jeff Exener just enrolled recently over, we're not quite to the summer, but just enrolled going into the summer, right? Those guys, I think they should still use their red shirt, but Matt Outen is very athletically gifted. Same thing with Lyric Samuel, but those guys still need to develop some technique here and there, whereas Koby Howard, I think, is ahead of this freshman group and is right on par with where Tyseer Denmark is. I think the biggest obstacle for Howard, getting the playbook down as a true freshman. As far as the depth chart goes itself, I would say there's probably a battle for that backup slot wide receiver position. And it's going to be a 3-man battle between Liam Clifford, Denmark, and Caden Saunders. And in that order to start, I think it would be Clifford. And then, because Clifford was probably going to start if they didn't get Trebor Peña out of the transfer portal. Clifford, and he can rotate and be a boundary. And same thing with Denmark. I think your rotation to begin will be those three of Hudson, Ross, and Peña. Remember, they can go 2 wide receiver sets. They don't always have to run 3 wide receivers. So those will be your first 3 receivers. And then Denmark and Clifford will rotate as the 4th and 5th players. I think Caden Saunders and someone like an Anthony Ivy are probably those next guys up. But it really depends on Josiah Brown and Peter Gonzalez and where they are coming back off of injury. And I feel bad for players that have to start their careers. Anybody that deals with the injury, is unfortunate. But Gonzalez and Brown should not be forgotten out of that 2024 recruiting class, like Denmark. They just haven't had the opportunity to prove themselves, and now they do. I've heard positive intel about Gonzalez. I still think there's more left to be said about what Josiah Brown could do, because he dealt with an injury his freshman year, and then his senior year, freshman year of college, senior year of high school. Gonzalez dealing with an injury his freshman year of college here. So those guys, there's still optimism for them. They just still need that time to get into the swing of things, be a full 100, 110% to go at it. So right now, your first 5, Hudson, Ross, Peña, in no particular order, Clifford and Denmark, and then Saunders and Ivy, just because they are veterans there. But Koby Howard, I think he's going to push his way through. I expect him to jump in any rotation past Saunders, past Ivy, Gonzalez and Brown. We'll see, but I think I have the most optimism for Howard out of that group of young, unproven wide receivers to this point in time. We'll see about Saunders. Remember, Saunders was dealing with an injury last season. I don't know if his outlook is bad for Penn State. I'm still eager to see what he can offer, being that he's going into his 4th year with the program, if I'm not mistaken. I would like to see Caden Saunders break through and live up to those high-end 4-star, right? He was just under the 5-star rating when he was coming out of high school. Never lived up to those projections, but we'll see, coming off of that injury, what he can do over the summer, and maybe he can gain some ground through training camp, because Penn State didn't go and get a starting caliber slot receiver by accident in Trebor Peña. It means that they were not sold on the idea of Liam Clifford, Caden Saunders, and Tyseer Denmark being that rotation in the slot. They wanted to go get somebody proven, when this is a championship caliber team. This is a team that is competing for a national title, and they did not like enough what they had in the slot. Now, long-term, Penn State with the 2025 class, 2026 is in a good spot. 2027 is in a better spot, and they already have 1 commit as it is. We'll talk about the long-term plan for Penn State's wide receiver room coming up next on Locked On Nittany Lions. I never really jumped onto the fire Marques Hagans bandwagon. I didn't think it was fair, given the circumstances, what he was inheriting, and the uphill battle that it was. And it's going to take time when they want to work through high school recruiting. But the 2024 class, solid with where he began, to get Tyseer Denmark, flip him away from Oregon. You get Peter Gonzalez and Josiah Brown, who still long-term could end up being really quality wide receivers. But then this 2025 class that Hagans followed it up with, because again, against the odds, with all of the negativity that was surrounding this group, like I said, laughingstock. It was a joke after that Notre Dame game in college football. All Penn State's wide receivers can't do anything right. But yet Hagans is still going out against all of that and gets 4 4-stars in the class of 2025. Class of 2026, LeVar Keys, Jasir Rogers, Davion Brown. Those names will be familiar to a lot of Penn State fans in the not-too-distant future. I've watched enough Jasir Rogers highlights to know that he has high-end 4-star, 5 stars, lofty aspirations in terms. That's a high expectation to put on somebody right now. But he has that kind of talent. He has that kind of capability. He has portions of skill sets that resemble 5-star abilities. Davion Brown, same thing, another 4-star. Marques Hagans is bringing this in. The future is extremely bright. And then we want to talk about legitimate 5-stars at this point in time. You go all the way out to 2027. I know that's so far away, and questions about, well, will he stay committed for that long? So we'll see, right? I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt, of course. I'll take the optimistic approach. Khalil Taylor is already a top 30 player in the country. He is one of the top, he'd be the top player in Pennsylvania if it wasn't for Keymon Spell being the number 1 running back in the nation. He's already verbally committed to Penn State. So a potential 5-star wide receiver in Khalil Taylor all the way in 2027. I know that's far away, everybody. I know. We're not even finished with 2026. You have 3 players at wide receiver who are probably going to end up all being 4-stars. Marques Hagans is doing that despite what he's had to deal with. And then to recruit guys out of the transfer portal, Devonte Ross, Kyron Hudson, Trebor Peña in the moment. So we will see the wide receiver room actually take this leap forward. And long term, it's only going to continue to get better. It is in a great situation right now. 2025 is important, though. You need to see it actually translate onto the football field. You need to see Peña do the things that he was brought in to do. You need to see, I think Devonte Ross of the 3 will statistically stand out the most. I have high expectations for Devonte Ross in comparison to those 3 transfers. So, but you need to actually see it. If it doesn't actually translate, then yeah, we revisit this conversation and we change it. Hagans, though, is doing everything that you could ask him and then some. This group going into next season, when they're going to lose 3 starters, have plenty of names that could all vie for playing time. Koby Howard and Tyseer Denmark, Peter Gonzalez, Josiah Brown, Matt Outen, Lyric Samuel. They get that year. There's not that pressure on them. They get that year to develop and focus on the skills that they need to refine so that they're ready going into year 2. You can always revisit the transfer portal. But there is a lot of depth here where it's not going to just be, it's a complete, you got to start over, hit the reset button again. You're losing your 3 transfer players that you just got for 1 season to hopefully win a championship. No. Hagans knows what he's doing in the short term and the long term with this wide receiver room. And like I said, if you extend this out, you have Khalil Taylor waiting, who could potentially be that game-changing type of player that you miss from a long time, that feels like it's a long time ago. Jahan Dotson, KJ Hamler, Chris Godwin. At least that's what, according to the recruiting rankings. And I'm not ready to rule out that, Koby Howard couldn't do that with the right training, or Tyseer Denmark couldn't do that just because they had 3 and 4 stars and Khalil Taylor has 5. That doesn't, that's not what I'm trying to argue here. But if we're going off those recruiting rankings right now, hey, Hagans is doing a phenomenal job. And you're going to see quarterback continue to be a position of strength for Penn State after Drew Aller, Ethan Grunkemeyer, Jackson Smolik. I just had an episode devoted to the quarterback room, so I hope people check that one out. For the quarterback situation, you need somebody to get the football to these wide receivers, and that's why quarterbacks are coming to Penn State, because wide receiver outlook, you don't come to Penn State as a quarterback with no help around you. There's plenty of help here in the future. So wide receiver is going to continue to build up, to be a position of strength, to remain a position of strength, and not go back to what it was in 2023 and 2024. They had to get through that. Love the situation they're in. Love the situation. And because I think it's only going to continue to trend in the right direction and only get better. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this show. Friendly reminder, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. What do you think about wide receiver? Which players are you most eager to see? Potentially breakout players. Which ones? Any of the transfer wide receivers? Be a part of the conversation. Thank you to the everydayers out there. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, become an everydayer. And for more episodes, more shows, more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, whether that's football, talk about recruiting, with basketball, wrestling, you name it, it's all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And once again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Now, for your second listen and watch, you got to check out the portal. It is Locked On's exclusive show entirely devoted to the transfer portal. hence the title, but also high school football recruiting. It's hosted by our recruiting expert here on the network, Brian Smith. You can check it out. It is available daily. That is The Portal on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.